Number 9. Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr was the face of courtroom justice as Perry Mason and later the tough detective in Ironside. He had a towering screen presence and booming voice, but what fans didn't know was that Burr was hiding a huge part of his identity. He was gay, and he went to great lengths to hide it from the public eye throughout his entire career. Burr created an elaborate backstory to throw off suspicion. He claimed to have been married and said his wife and child died tragically, but there were no records to support this. In reality, Burr was in a 30-year relationship with actor Robert Benavides, whom he met on the set of Perry Mason. The two lived together and even ran a vineyard later in life, but the relationship was kept private and never publicly acknowledged during Burr's lifetime. Hollywood insiders knew the truth, but Burr's fans remained in the dark until after his death in 1993. In retrospect, many admire how he carved out a long-lasting career while protecting his private life, though it's hard not to wonder what his life could have been like had he lived in a more accepting time. Number 8. Randolph Scott. Randolph Scott was the rugged cowboy of classic westerns, with a chiseled jawline, steely stare, and a voice that could command the attention of an entire saloon. Throughout the 1930s to 1950s, he was a staple of the genre, starring in dozens of films that defined him as the ultimate strong, silent type. But off-screen, Scott was at the center of long-standing rumors about his sexuality, especially his close relationship with Cary Grant. Scott and Grant famously lived together for over a decade in a Santa Monica beach house that the media affectionately called their bachelor hall. Magazine spreads showed them cooking, swimming, and lounging around together, leading to speculation that went beyond bromance. Though both actors married women, Scott was married to actress Patricia Stillman for 43 years. Many Hollywood insiders believed it was more about maintaining appearances than anything else. The studios, of course, kept the narrative tightly controlled and dismissed any suggestion that the relationship was romantic. Unlike some of his peers, Scott never addressed the rumors publicly. He was intensely private and maintained a dignified public image until his death in 1987. While we may never know the full truth, what's clear is that Randolph Scott lived a life carefully curated by the Hollywood system. Number 7. Sal Mineo. Sal Mineo burst onto the scene as the sensitive Plato in Rebel Without a Cause, and quickly became a teen idol. With his expressive face and emotionally raw performances, he seemed poised for long-term stardom. But behind the scenes, Mineo was wrestling with his sexuality at a time when Hollywood had no space for openly gay actors. He was one of the few actors of his time who, later in his life, admitted to being gay. For years, he kept it quiet, fearing the effect it would have on his career. When he finally began living more openly in the 70s, it was considered a brave move, especially since he'd already been pushed to the fringes of the industry. His once promising career had stalled, and many believe his sexuality played a role in that. Tragically, Mineo was murdered in 1976 at just 37. The crime shocked Hollywood, and even though it was later ruled a robbery gone wrong, many feared it was a hate crime. Today, Mineo is remembered not just for his acting, but for being one of the first to step into the light, however briefly, in a time of shadows. Number 6. James Dean. James Dean was the symbol of rebellion in the 1950s. With just a handful of films under his belt, Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant, he became a cultural icon almost overnight. But behind his intense gaze and moody coolness was a young man navigating complicated feelings about his identity. There were long-standing rumors that Dean was bisexual or gay. Several people who knew him personally claimed he had relationships with men, and biographers have suggested that he had affairs with producers and other Hollywood insiders. Dean himself is quoted as saying he didn't want to go through life with one hand tied behind his back, hinting at a fluid sexuality. Dean died tragically in a car crash at just 24, and much of his personal life remains a mystery. Because of his early death, he was spared the decades of hiding and suppression that many of his peers endured. But he's still considered by many as someone who challenged the norms, not just in his acting, but in his lifestyle. Number 5. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift was one of the most intense and magnetic actors of his time. Known for his sensitive performances in films like A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity, Clift was the poster boy for brooding masculinity. Off-screen, though, he was struggling with deep internal battles, not the least of which was his sexuality. There were constant whispers about Clift being gay or bisexual. He never publicly confirmed it, but friends, colleagues, and biographers later shared stories that painted a picture of a man tormented by who he really was. Clift had relationships with both men and women, but was said to have been most emotionally connected to men. His close friendship with Elizabeth Taylor was often interpreted as a safe space for him to be himself without judgment. Clift's life was marked by pain, both physical and emotional. A near-fatal car accident in 1956 left him disfigured and addicted to painkillers and alcohol. As his looks faded, so did Hollywood's interest, and he became more isolated. He died young, at just 45. His life remains one of Hollywood's most tragic stories, an immensely talented actor who never fully escaped the chains of his secret. Number 4. Tab Hunter. Tab Hunter was the all-American boy of 1950s cinema. With his blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and squeaky clean image, he became a teen idol almost overnight. He starred in light-hearted romances, beach flicks, and even had a music career. But what fans didn't know was that Tab was living a double life. He was gay, and hiding it under immense pressure from the studios. Hunter's sexuality was an open secret in Hollywood circles, but never spoken about publicly. The studio worked overtime to create fake relationships for him, pairing him up with Natalie Wood and Debbie Reynolds for photo ops. Behind the scenes, though, Hunter was dating figure skater Ronnie Robertson, and later, actor Anthony Perkins. He lived in fear that a scandal could end his career, and when Confidential magazine threatened to out him, the stress was overwhelming. In his later years, Tab Hunter took control of his own narrative. He came out publicly in his 2005 memoir, Tab Hunter Confidential, revealing the emotional toll of living in the closet. It was a brave move, and one that helped reshape how people viewed the handsome star. His story was later turned into a documentary, and Hunter finally received the recognition he deserved, not just for his talent, but for his courage. Number 3. Anthony Perkins. Best known as Norman Bates in Psycho, Anthony Perkins had a unique charm and screen presence that made him unforgettable. But behind the eyes of Hollywood's favorite boy next door turned psycho was a man battling with his own identity. Perkins was gay, but lived much of his life hiding it, caught between the conservative Hollywood system and his own personal fears. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, Perkins had several relationships with men, including fellow actor Tab Hunter. However, his handlers worked to keep everything under wraps. He even dated a few women publicly, again likely orchestrated by studios trying to protect their investment. The pressure to be marketable led him into years of secrecy and emotional suppression. In the 1970s, Perkins married photographer Barry Berenson, and the two had 2 sons. Many believe the marriage was a genuine companionship more than a romantic relationship. Perkins never publicly came out, and his sexual orientation wasn't widely acknowledged until after his death in 1992 from AIDS-related complications. Like Rock Hudson, his passing forced another conversation about the cost of hiding one's truth for the sake of fame. Number 2. Cary Grant. Cary Grant was the epitome of Hollywood sophistication. With his slick style, debonair charm, and perfect comedic timing, Grant became one of the most iconic leading men in movie history. But throughout his career, rumors followed him. Rumors that he was gay or bisexual and had romantic relationships with men, particularly fellow actor Randolph Scott. Grant and Scott lived together for over a decade in what was dubbed a bachelor pad by the media. The studio often staged photos of the two hanging out in beach chairs or doing domestic activities, playing it off as a wholesome living arrangement. But many believe the two were much more than just roommates. Grant was also married 5 times, which only added more intrigue to the question of his true sexuality. Grant never addressed the rumors publicly, and his estate has remained tight-lipped. Some biographers insist he was straight, others say into men and women. Number 1. Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson was the ultimate heartthrob of the 1950s and 60s. Tall, handsome, and charming, he starred in a string of romantic comedies and dramas that made women swoon and studios rich. From Pillow Talk with Doris Day to Giant with Elizabeth Taylor, Hudson was always the rugged romantic lead. Behind the scenes, however, Hudson lived a very different life. He was quietly gay, something his studio and management worked very hard to keep out of the spotlight. Rumors swirled around Hudson for years, but his team went to great lengths to cover them up. He was linked to several women publicly, including a short-lived marriage to Phyllis Gates, his agent's secretary, which many now believe was a publicity stunt. Tabloids occasionally hinted at his private life, but nothing concrete ever surfaced. Hudson kept his real relationships out of the public eye, and Hollywood played along because he was too valuable a star to risk controversy. It wasn't until the 1980s that the truth came out. Hudson became one of the first high-profile celebrities to die of AIDS in 1985, and his diagnosis forced the world to confront not only the disease, but also the man's sexuality.